Well, of course, unless you've been living under a rock or something, you would be aware that the T20 Women's T20 World Cup has been going on over the last few days. And of course, it's into its final stages as well. We have the final to be played on Sunday, quite literally the final stages. And just to discuss our impressions of what has happened over the last few days, few weeks, I have with me a very good friend and a dear colleague, Annesha Ghosh, who's been quite closely associated with women's cricket for a long time. So I thought we'd bring her in for her expertise. Anisha, first of all, unlike a lot of people, I have actually quite enjoyed what has happened throughout this World Cup. Of course, India's exit has been a little bit disappointing. Australia's exit has been quite a bit of a shock. But apart from that, yes, there have been some low scores, but there's been some very, very good cricket on display.
Absolutely. I think I will be on the same page as you, and maybe not on the same page as the larger part of the demographic that has been following the World Cup, who might think that this has been a slightly lukewarm sort of a tournament. But the business end has thrown in more twists and turns than you might find in a Christopher Nolan movie or an Abbas Mastan flick. So well done to teams like West Indies, South Africa, New Zealand for making this really spicy. The last few games at this ninth edition of the Women's T20 World Cup, a lot happened in the lead up to the tournament, because remember, this tournament was supposed to be held in Bangladesh. So that was a twist unto itself, right? The last minute shifting of the tournament from Bangladesh, very different conditions to the UAE, some similarities, sure, but all teams had picked their squads based on that, keeping Bangladesh's surfaces, specifically Sylhet and Dhaka, the two cities that were to host the tournament, in mind. But here we are. I am speaking to you from Dubai, which is where the final is going to be played in less than 22 hours' time. And Sharjah was, of course, the other venue where the semi-final, the second one, took place. And both the semi-finals dished out absolute quality cricket. In the first semi-final, as we saw, South Africa played their best cricket in a while. They had been leading up to that big moment for several years. We all know what happened in Cape Town on their home soil in the final of the ICC Women's T20 World Cup 2023, where they were comprehensively beaten by Australia, mind you, in Cape Town, Newlands in February last year. And this semi-final, just 2 or 3 days ago, in Dubai, the first semi-final, Manju, was a rematch of that game. And South Africa walked into that game with, I would say, the mental advantage, the psychological edge, so to speak, because remember, for the first time in several editions of the Women's T20 World Cup, Australia did not have two of their talismanic figures in knockouts. One, because they did not have much of a choice to
Yeah.
play this World Cup without that person. And I'm talking about a knockout specialist, a legend of the game, their captain, former captain Maverick, Meg Lanning. Look at Meg Lanning's knockout stats, and you'll be probably forced to pick your jaw from the floor. We saw that 49 run knock against India in the semi final. And she finished off that innings with a six, a flick of Renuka Singh, and that completely turned the match on its head. They went into the defense with the psychological advantage again, the momentum, an oft used word. And here they were without Meg Lanning. They didn't have much of control, so to speak, because Meg Lanning, as we know, decided to international retired from international cricket last year for health related reasons. But the second body blow, so to speak, was in the form of losing Alisa Healy in the lead up to their last group stage game in Sharjah, and that was against India. So Alisa Healy was injured. She could not play that last group stage match. And even for the semi final, she was unavailable. And Alisa Healy, in knockouts again, has put her hand up. She's taken on bowling attacks, blunted them morally, psychologically, emotionally, deflated them. And here were Australia in a crucial transition phase. Talia McGrath, I rate her highly as a captain and as an all-rounder. She is the future, and she's great understanding of the sport, a great reader of the game. She is a very important figure even in the WBBL setup, the domestic setup, the striker setup, which is where she's going to link up with the likes of Smriti Mandana and even Laura Wolfart for that matter, the South Africa captain. So I rate Talia Magra very, very highly as a leader as well as a captain. But Australia missed two of their batting giants, and South Africa capitalized on that in a way India were not able to. So India would be kind of kicking themselves because they probably had the best chance to not only make the semi-finals by beating or eliminating an Australian side, but also they had easily the best chance to win a World Cup. This was by a distance the Indian women's cricket team's best chance to win an ICC trophy in a while. They could not make the best of the weaknesses that emerged out of nowhere. Nobody wants to lose out key players through injuries, right? And the kind of injuries both Alisa Healy had and even Taylor Vlaming, as a follower of the sport, your heart goes out to them. Watching Taylor Vlaming, such an important figure in cricket, to have a talent like Taylor and her pace, it's unthinkable. Especially in the women's game. The women's game needs a player like Taylor, especially. And we all know what Alisa Healy, how she has revolutionized women's cricket, so to speak, right? With her big hitting, her fearlessness, her pluck, her chirping behind the stumps. All of that is Alisa Healy as a package. So Australia missed that, and kudos to South Africa, the way Annesha Ghosh played in that game, the way Laura Wolfart, a very young captain, only 25, 26, one of the future greats. And I remember having a chat with Laura Wolfart in the lead up to the tournament in my capacity, in the capacity I was working at initially for the greater part of this World Cup. And I did end up asking her on camera, Laura, is it difficult to guess who has inspired you most as leader? And is it difficult to guess more so because you have always been vocal about her batting skills and how her batting skills have influenced your batting? And I'm talking about Meg Lanning. And she did go on to say how Meg Lanning's body language, the way she took responsibility and led the team by example in crucial moments. We saw that Laura Wolfart, in that semi-final. We saw South Africa rally around each other as a unit. And that is what you need to beat a team like Australia, even when their chips are down. Because even when their chips are down, they are mighty relentless. Beth Mooney played a superb knock again. There she was, keeping it going for at a runner ball, I think. And she was out there to do another Beth Mooney on the opposition in a vital game. Annabelle Sutherland has been terrific. Sophie Molyneux can be a game changer on the night. So even without some of their stalwarts, Australia can be a menace for the opposition. But as I mentioned earlier, kudos to South Africa for doing what they did. And it was a great semi-final. If I'm to pick a more favorite kind of semi-final, I would definitely pick the South Africa Australia one, simply because of how fearless and how audacious South Africa were in their approach. Now, if you are to talk about the second semi-final, New Zealand and West Indies, I think the cricket world was kind of divided as to who to support, because two great stories again. Who would have thunk, right? Hashtag. Very few people would have given either team a chance, especially New Zealand, considering they had to clear the pool first. And it was the group of death, as we were calling Group A. But who thought Group B in itself would be such a blockbuster kind of affair? West Indies, world champions 2016 at the Eden Gardens, took Australia, who were at the time eyeing a four-peat, eyeing their fourth consecutive title back in 2016, caught them completely unawares on 3rd of April 2016. I remember that date very well, Devan, because personally, it matters a lot to me. It was my first ever women's cricket match internationally as a spectator. And I remember turning up at the Eden Gardens for the first game. It was a double header. Remember, the men were playing later in the day, West Indies versus England.
Yeah.
Carlos Brathwaite, remember the name? Ian Bishop, what a guy. And barely 100 people, a few hundred people had turned up. And that was so deflating as a viewer, as somebody who's gone into a stadium to watch a women's international cricket match for the first time. and it's supposed to be a World Cup. That made me thinking. That made me think about what's happening. But the on-field action took care of everything. Haley Matthews then, having just turned 18, played a blinder of a knock. We know what Deandra Doughton did. Megan Shute bowled the final over. The rest is history. The women scripted their victory, and the men obviously followed suit. 8 years on, here they were playing their final group stage game against England, who were sitting pretty and comfortable atop the table, Group B table, leading by run rate. NRR was such a big buzzword in the group stages, right? And there they were. Kiana Joseph, left hander, does a Haley Matthews on England, the Australia 2016 final edition, keeps swiping everything into the leg side and gets the job done. That's what it matters, right? It's not always how classy you look. I remember Jemima Rodriguez said during an ICC broadcast feature, it took me some time to find meaning in ugly shots because she's grown up on classical batting. You walk into any Maidan in Mumbai or Kolkata, what coaches have traditionally taught their students in cricket, male or female, is you should look good. Yeah, cover drive अच्छा दिखना चाहिए, लेग ग्लांस अच्छा दिखना चाहिए, उसमें डॉट आए कि यू गेट 1 run doesn't matter, but अच्छा दिखना चाहिए. For women's cricket in India to have come out of that, thanks in a huge part to Harmanpreet Kaur, to the likes of Smriti Mandana, the fact that they're adding or placing a lot of value on big hitting, clearing the ropes. Shafali Verma, people, when she burst onto the scene with Women's T20 Challenge, started equating her to Virendra Sehwag. Hand-eye coordination, very little feet movement, all of that. So for Jemima to have said that on camera, that I am now okay to playing ugly shots. And here was Kiana Joseph actually playing not so great looking shots. Her feet were relatively immobile, but she got the job done. The fastest 50 against England, one of the heavier favorites in the tournament in T20 World Cups. England had to pack their bags. So the group stages, I think the latter half of it really added spice, added drama to the tournament, and the women's game needed this. The women's game definitely needed this because I'm pretty sure Australia, despite their zeal and their commitment to wanting to win more World Cups, and who doesn't, right? You would always want to be right at the start of the pack. I'm sure they, for the longest time, have wanted to be challenged. India have done that. We've seen that in bilaterals and in T20 World Cups. But for South Africa to have gone that extra mile and gotten the job done, I think it's a great period we are witnessing. The past few days, it's great for the health of the women's game. And who knows if New Zealand or South Africa, whoever wins, I've got to borrow a cliche from one of the commentary greats, Mr. Ravi Shastri. In the end, cricket is going to be the winner.
I thought
All
you'll
three
go down
results
that
are
route.
possible. It is
Yes.
a definite victory for the sport because who knows what it might do for women's cricket in New Zealand or in South Africa. Can SA20 for the women's team in South Africa be a possibility? Can the women's game go one rung higher in its professional setup in terms of its professionalism in New Zealand? Remember, New Zealand cricket have done a lot of good and they've been pathbreakers to equalize match fee. Hey, it was NZC first to bring in provisions to support mothers. We have a Leah Tahuhu playing a starring role for New Zealand in this World Cup. Are we thinking about those facets? Every little piece of support that female players get, and I'm going to say female players, it matters a lot because women's physiology, women's socio-economic position in the world at large, it's not a subcontinent issue, is not on the same plane as men. So for what NZC have done and for them to have invested in the younger pool of players, a Georgia Plymouth is about 20 years old, Eden Carson 23. Brooke Halliday, 28, has been a domestic toiler of sorts. Izzy Gaze, 20, 21-year-olds, 23-year-olds are getting the job done while you have two stalwarts, Susie Bates and Sophie Devine, also putting their hand up. as has Leah Tahuhu. Great stories. Immensely glad for women's cricket in general for how things have panned out. And thanks also to Australia because they are the gold standard in this sport. If they had not pushed their opponents to dive deep, dig deep into themselves, I don't think what we are seeing from other teams like South Africa, West Indies, New Zealand, it would have been possible. So well done, Australia. In your defeat lies a massive, massive victory for your team and your setup back home.
So I guess we've learned two large lessons that the Indian cricket team should always played in the UAE. I think UAE should be blacklisted by the BCCI as a venue in terms of ICC events. And the second lesson is that Australia, the next time they have a three-peat, then they should probably skip the fourth World Cup because it seems to just befall them.
100%.
But I'm going to put you in a slight spot. So you have talked about the importance of this potential victory for both South Africa and New Zealand. You've talked about your favorite semi-final, but I'm going to ask you to pick a winner.
I have given this thought because a lot of people have asked me around, not on camera. So you're the first person to ask me on camera on the eve of the final. So you're getting the exclusive, so to speak. Sorry, don't need to hype myself up. But I think, and I wrote this in the form of a tweet. Sorry, Australia. I think South Africa have internalized their learnings from the T20 World Cup final last year. We did see them implement some of those in the semi-final and in the group stages as well. And I think having made two T20 World Cup finals on the trot, they want to get the job done through this more than through skills. We did see New Zealand make a few false steps in that match in the semi-finals final against West Indies. It was a very neck and neck affair, right? It went down to the proverbial wire. I think South Africa will end up winning this battle. Hence, I will perhaps back South Africa to win. But I'm heading into that tournament. I will be in attendance as a spectator. I want to see both teams give it their all, and they will give it their all without me even wanting it, because
Yeah.
both teams wanted that bad.
Yeah.
New Zealand have not won a women's world title since 2000. They won the ODI World Cup in 2000, and ever since it's been a story of what ifs. They have been perpetual underachievers, in my view. They've had the greats in Susie Bates, Leah Tahuhu, Katie Martin, who is now part of the ICC commentary panel. You wanted her to win something as well, simply because of what she's done and to the sport, to women's cricket in New Zealand. And she was a mighty good wicketkeeper batter, and now a great broadcaster, great reader and caller of the game. So you want to see something similar happen in terms of getting rewards for their toil for Sophie Devine, their captain, for whom it's going to be the last T20 World Cup as captain. She's already mentioned that, and she is not going to reverse her decision come what may on 20th of October, which is tomorrow. And for Susie Bates. Susie Bates is also playing her ninth T20 World Cup, and there will be this huge Sophie Devine and Susie Bates sized hole in T20 World Cups. If they decide to not play another T20 World Cup, what do we know? Can they play another T20 World Cup? Heck yes. Just look at them. Look at the way they've been performing. Sophie Devine blanked India in that opening fixture in Dubai, right? Completely caught India off guard. A 50 to kick off the campaign. And if you look at that New Zealand win against India, in hindsight, they were coming off 10 consecutive losses on the trot, were again blanked by Australia just in the lead up to the tournament. But there were positives, of which I felt Eden Carson could have a great tournament. I tweeted about it also because she was just so interesting to watch when that series was taking place in the lead up, the bilateral series. Eden Carson delivered big time. I'm personally a big fan of her giggle, especially when she brings that out at the post match presentation. But she's a street smart, wily bowler. Pair her up with somebody like an Amelia Kerr, whose googly remains unreadable even now. She debuted at 16, and even at 24, she turned 24 a week ago. her googly keeps befuddling batters. And you see her having grown in stature, in maturity as well. She mentioned at the post semi-final press conference that it was Amelia Kerr who told Susie Bates that Suze, it should be you bowling the last over, maybe, and not Brooke Halliday. And look what she did. She did end up stalling West Indies. And yeah, I want it to be a great contest. There's going to be a lot of tears, I'm certain, because of the victory for the winning
Yeah.
side and also for the defeat. But I think it's going to be one of the all-time classics in cricket, simply because of what it's going to do for the women's game.
Yeah, it's interesting you brought up the 2000 World Cup. I think that was the one which was sponsored,
Like
primarily
cricket,
sponsored by our common employers. But yes, anytime anything happens in terms of a league or a tournament, when somebody asks me for a prediction, who would you like to win? I always say that I want to see a first-time winner. So in that sense, it's a win-win. Cricket is the winner, as you and Mr. Shastri would obviously say. But we have to touch upon the fact that you mentioned, India being caught unawares. It's interesting that you mentioned this was India's best opportunity. Yes, I would agree to an extent with you. But I personally was never convinced about the Indian 11 selection right from the start, because six bowlers is one too many. And this is a chat which you and I have had in the past as well, that if India do go in with a sixth bowler, that sixth bowler has to be Harmanpreet Kaur. How much would you agree with that? Because that just leaves a lot of heavy lifting for the top order to do. And I felt that's where India really capitulated.
I would agree with that in part, especially because if you look at how the Dubai surface or the Sharjah pitch has played, run scoring has not been the easiest thing to do. So, sure, that can be picked out as one of the factors. But I do think that the uncertainty around the number three position is
Yeah.
it wasn't just something that the media was trying to make a story out of. It was a genuine concern, and I felt Dailan Hemalata initially did well, even in Bangladesh, but there were multiple candidates tried out in that position. And did that uncertainty help India at all? Um, I'd like to believe no. Sure, the players, the coaching staff, they all wanted, they were working towards this dream. And I've seen this Indian team work as a cohesive unit. This was a happy dressing room. This still is a happy dressing room. They've gone through a very painful loss, sure, but a happy dressing room is an important ingredient to success, to succeed, for success. I think India had a lot going for them on that front, because not always has that worked out in their favor in the past. But tactically, they were not foolproof. And it was exposed when they were pushed to the brink. And when the time did eventually come for them to test their preparations, they were found wanting. That's a lesson for them to take. It's not the end of the world. Sure, all of these players, the majority of them, if you look at Harmanpreet, Smriti, they've been such great servants of the game, and they want to win this for themselves, for the country. And I think as human beings, they understand the kind of stature they carry. They understand how cricket has changed their own lives. And they're good people. They want the same to happen to very many thousands of lakhs of other girls, other women in India and in the subcontinent. So that maiden World Cup senior ICC trophy win will not only change women's cricket in India, I think it will have the effect of a rising tide in women's cricket in the subcontinent. I think a Pakistan
Yeah.
women's cricket will also develop. Bangladesh will
Yeah.
also develop. Nepal, Bhutan, everything will get better. And they want to do it for the next generations, because they have several privileges and facilities now that the predecessors didn't have. And they want to make this team that example that the world is envious of, just as the Australian women's cricket is. Their hearts are in the right place. things did not go their way. But there's an ODI World Cup in less than a year's time, waiting to happen on home soil. It's a format that has traditionally suited them the best, even though they have upped their T20 game massively in the past 7 years. They have been semi-finalists since their group stage exit in 2016 in all of the subsequent editions, but they have things to reflect on. And I'm certain, because most of these players, the core, has their hearts in the right place. I'm pretty certain they are going to act on it and have very honest conversations with themselves and those around them, the movers and shakers in Indian cricket, so to speak, and they'll find answers to questions that remain unanswered. There have been themes that have remained consistent over their inability to cross the final hurdle, so to speak, the semi final, and now the group stage. Those questions need answering, and that will happen over time. Part of which should also be backing players, role clarity,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
backing them long term. Even if there are
yeah,
failures, back them long term. Georgia Plymouth, for example, right? She did not have a great run in the top three in the lead up to the tournament, but New Zealand didn't give up on them. Look, she's in the top five of the run getters charts at this T20 World Cup, and she's only 20, 21 years old. So I think that's an important lesson, because India have no dearth in talent. Gold mine of talent. The WPL has helped it, but the talent was there. The
yeah,
WPL has just shone a bright light on it.
yeah, yeah,
And you have a significant influx of young, driven talent, very fit players, and with the experience and pluck of the senior pros, I think India have in them to
yeah.
do what they have not been able to do so far. But I will still maintain the 2024 Women's T20 World Cup was their best opportunity. And one of the key reasons being there was no Meg Lanning in the
Yeah.
Australian side. And she's been a thorn in their path for a long time.
Yes.
And I say
Yes.
this with utmost respect and as a praise to Meg Lanning. So, yeah, they will rue this lost opportunity, but they do have a lot to look forward to. And yeah, maybe things will change.
I think it's impossible to find somebody who's not a Meg Lanning fan, and you're definitely not looking at such a person. I'll just take this opportunity to address, some of the chatter which comes on social media, and I don't even want you to respond to it. But when people say that, इनको facilities चाहिए, इनको equal pay चाहिए, और कर लो Instagram reels and everything. I mean, I think you guys are real idiots because you're not realizing there's a lot of hard work which goes behind it. Of course, it is sport. You will have days when you will lose. You will have days when you will win, and the big win will come. If Indian fans had applied the same yardstick to the men's cricket team when they started playing cricket, uh, I hope most of you know that it took India 20 years to win their first Test match. Just go look up when India won their first women's Test match in comparison, and you'll find a little bit of a yardstick there. But just going forward, yeah, go ahead.
Divan, I've got to bring something in, something that fascinates me no end,
Yeah,
and that is the kitchen narrative. Anything that goes wrong with not just Indian women's cricket or any female team, I've
of
seen that
course.
happen at the 2023 FIFA Women's World Cup that I was covering in Sydney,
Yes.
Australia.
Yeah.
Whatever happens, female athletes are asked to go to the kitchen directly. Don't go to the bathroom, don't go to your bedroom, kitchen. अरे kitchen में तो
I think
जाना पड़ेगा, खाओगे कैसे? How do you
correct.
feed
Go to the
yourself?
kitchen, open
Zomato
your
से?
fridge. Yeah, find something nice and nutritious. I think that's generally. I'm sure that is the
Absolutely.
central message. Yeah, I'm sure
That's one of
that's
my
part of the
favorite.
message.
I mean, it just cracks me up every single time. Kitchen में है क्या? मतलब वो, I used to
No, I
watch a
think
lot of
yeah.
CID when I was a kid, and ACP प्रद्युमन ऐसे फिजिक्स के तरह अपने उंगलियों के ऐसे करके ना used to say, दया पता लगाओ क्या हुआ. So I want to know कि
Kitchen.
kitchen में actually है क्या? What is in the kitchen? But I'm a big fan of the kitchen narrative because it just adds a lot of comic relief to what is otherwise serious discussions. And I think I
Yeah,
will completely echo your thoughts. It's just
yeah.
juvenile to say that they
Yeah,
make
yeah,
reels and all. We live in the age of social media. Everybody makes reels, okay? And
yeah,
do you think
yeah,
that they are not aware of the job at hand? They are not aware
yeah,
of being role models, professionals?
yeah,
Come on, let's have better conversations where we are actually talking sense. So yeah, kitchen
yeah.
narrative, keep them coming. I can't yeah, it just makes me feel good about me paying a lot of internet bills because I get a lot of entertainment out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I'm in a hotel. Otherwise, I would have headed to the kitchen straight after this. But just to touch upon another slightly controversial thing which has happened over the last couple of days, a misquote basically. Mithali Raj spoke to PTI and she spoke largely about the succession plan in terms of captaincy. And it was reported in a few media houses as saying that Harmanpreet Kaur should be sacked. Now, of course, I'm not really an expert on any of this. But what I want to know from you is there a possibility of a succession plan as yet? Because just to me, looking from the outside, it seems like Harmanpreet is the natural leader of this team. And she is, by most yardsticks, perhaps the best batter in this side at the moment, the most versatile batter. And she's actually had a very good year for people who are probably not following women's cricket a lot. She's actually led India to test victories, unprecedented test victories this year. So, of course, there is a little bit of that burden of multi-format captaincy, but on the flip side, India don't play a lot of cricket. In fact, many people did point to that as a potential weakness ahead of this World Cup, that India didn't really have a serious match in about 2 months. So, your thoughts on that? If there is, plans of a succession, then would Harmanpreet Kaur be comfortable continuing as a player? Would that be a feasibility?
That's something only Harmanpreet Kaur can answer, Devan, to be very honest. I'm sure the conversations uh, exist within power, the corridors of power, so to speak.
Hmm.
Harmanpreet, as you rightly said, she's been an able leader as far as taking the team to the first ever Women's T20 World Cup final is concerned, that happened in 2020, and she's delivered for the country in multiple formats. Are there other leaders in the side? Sure. I mean, and Harmanpreet herself would agree that it's not just Harmanpreet Kaur who is steering the ship. She has good support from the likes of Smriti Mandana. She has Jemima Rodrigues, Deepti Sharma, and that's exactly what I alluded to. Even if you happen to cut a clip out of this, no, I would respect you even more than I do right now if you keep the entire context together, because
Yeah,
I know that what happens when people are misquoted. I
yeah,
did allude to how cohesive a unit this
you did.
Indian
Yeah,
dressing room is, and I do know for a fact that even though the badge may rest with one person alone, as is the case with even a class monitor, right? But it's not always that one person who's steering the ship. When the right time comes, and I am not the best person to make a comment on this, there are people far better equipped with the understanding of what needs to be done, I think, who can take a call on what the future looks like for Harmanpreet Kaur, or Smriti Mandana, Jemima Rodrigues, or Deepti Sharma. But this team has leaders who are working towards that one goal. It's not an isolated or divided dressing room. So there's no reason to believe that a leader, a designated captain, doesn't have the support. What needs to be done, as I said, is somebody else's call to take. But there are leaders, and the WPL has shown that there are leadership options. When does the board take a call? Would Harmanpreet be comfortable or not? Again, they are the best
yeah, yeah,
people to answer that. And whenever that happens, it can happen. The ODI World Cup takes place next year in India, as I mentioned. There's an ODI series that begins next week. So
yes,
essentially, New Zealand, who are playing the final tomorrow, will most likely board that first
yeah,
flight to Ahmedabad in the western part of India and
yeah,
start playing the ODI series. I
yeah,
think 24th of October onwards, and the
yeah,
Indian selection panel has already announced the squad, and Harmanpreet is the ODI captain, and
yeah,
Smriti Mandana is our deputy. What needs to be read in that is something that People who love to read into such things will read. What happens to the T20 format? Will India opt for split captaincy? Has that happened in the past? Yes. Mithali Raj herself
Mm.
was the ODI captain for a longer period of time. Harmanpreet became the full time T20 captain after India's 2016 group stage exit. I know I've quoted the math lady GIF many times on Twitter and Instagram, saying how many parallels there exist between the 2016 T20 World Cup and this edition. Will the Indian
Mm.
split captaincy narrative also go the same way? जानने के लिए watch this space.
Yeah, and in fact, I'll just tell you a little snippet that I'm currently in Rajkot. I'm doing a Ranji Trophy game between Saurashtra and Chhattisgarh. So one of my co-commentators is former India wicketkeeper Samantha Lobato, and we were having a little bit of a joke and a giggle about whether New Zealand will actually roll out a B squad for this match, having just finished the World Cup, especially if they turn out to be champions, because it will be quite unfortunate to follow up a World Cup final victory with this kind of a series. But I think
But
in
but
all seriousness,
just to
yeah,
set the record straight, Debayan, to be fair to all those who do a lot of hard work, put in a lot of hard work arranging these bilateral series, this wasn't something that was planned out of the blue. This was part of the calendar for a very long time, and it was penciled in much earlier than anybody got in any indication that India will be out in the group stages of the T20 World Cup or New
yeah, yeah,
Zealand
yeah,
will end up making the final. It wasn't an afterthought.
yeah,
This was very much part of the calendar. It's just that things have taken a very interesting turn in the past fortnight here in the United Arab
yeah, yeah.
Emirates, and New Zealand are playing the final on 20th of October, which is tomorrow, and India are already back home.
Yeah, also, the final flight was bound to be from Dhaka to Ahmedabad, so now it's just changed from Dhaka to Dubai. So it's only a couple of hours maybe extra. So just before we wrap up with a quick thought about the final, what we'll perhaps also just look ahead in terms of the ODI World Cup that you mentioned. I just personally feel that this Indian team, the way that it's composed, it's better suited for ODI cricket because there are a lot of quality players. There are probably not very explosive batters all the way through, and that suits the sort of tempo of an ODI much better because ODIs are essentially more like extended test matches or rather shortened test matches than extended T20Is. So in that sense, I think the Indian fans, Indian administrators, Indian selectors need to keep faith with the core of this current 11 or current 15 or 16 players. And maybe with a few tweaks, they'll be able to land at the right team, which can perhaps deliver history for them in India.
100%. As I said, I have been a firm believer in the fact that India's playing personnel are world class, and I do maintain that despite whatever has happened. And I'm not having this conversation with you in the capacity of an unofficial spokesperson or PR person of the Indian women's cricket team. I have followed these team
Yeah.
closely enough, and my career has run parallelly since the 2017 ODI World Cup. I remember covering that World Cup as a rookie journalist from my offices in Mumbai, and I have gone on to, you know, read their game by watching them in local tournaments when nobody was covering or others were busy. And I was not the only one. It's not as though I'm proclaiming myself to be the only champion of women's cricket in India. No, there have been others
Yeah.
as well. But the numbers were not significant enough. And I've seen this team grow. I've seen their unity grow. I've seen their desire, that hunger to win a World Cup, a senior women's World Cup, not just for themselves, but for the future generations. I will keep harping on this point until they actually win a World Cup because I know how much it would mean to them. They know that they could be that rising tide to lift not just women's cricket in India, but maybe women's sport in India and the subcontinent at large if they go on to win an ICC Women's Cricket World title or a Commonwealth Games gold or an Olympic gold come to LA
Yeah.
2028.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the dhamaka that the great Julan Goswami did speak of before her retirement, कि India को एक धमाका चाहिए. India needs something explosive. The WPL has happened, Debayon. The WPL has done something. The WPL was the start of a new era. There's no denying that. But I have seen a lot of things fizzle out slightly in the second edition. I will not say that on camera right now, But I've seen that the kind of impetus I expected the second season to give to the women's game, it did not happen at the expected level. So, what is the X factor we are looking for? What is that missing piece of the puzzle we all want to find and put it in place? It's that world title. And if that happens, I can tell you a lot of these female cricketers or who make reels, right, as the detractors like to say, their main job, the critics who in a very juvenile fashion think that their main job, according to the players' own perception about themselves, is to make reels or be in the kitchen, etc. Is to do that. They want it for the sake of women's cricket in India and
Yeah.
the sports growth as well. Because until that happens, a lot of the other few explosions that are waiting to happen, that won't happen.
Yeah.
And they know that not everything can be said on camera or can be written
Yeah.
about. But women's cricket in India is right now in a good place. Despite this group stage exit, I'm very optimistic that if they do go on to learn from that mistake, learning from one's mistakes is very important. Look at South Africa. A year is all it's taken. They've
Yeah.
lost
Yeah.
several crucial players. But you need to have those honest conversations with yourselves as a team, but also as
Mm.
individuals.
Mm-hmm.
Are you failing yourself as a player on more occasions than not? And is it a conversation that you're willing to have with yourself in privacy? Is what I'm looking at. And I know that those conversations are happening. And I'm firmly optimistic that things will click.
Yeah.
Things will click,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
people need to sort of look inwards, and people also need to block out noise. And when that happens, when that marriage of looking inwards and blocking out noise happens, reels can happen, doesn't matter. Bilateral series victories can happen, doesn't matter. But come the big ticket event, the next one, which is the ODI World Cup in India, followed by the 2026 T20 World Cup in England, completely different conditions. But even before these 18, 20 months will be over, and you'll be looking at another major event in the shortest format. India are better suited to the ODI format, but I think they are mighty good now as T20 as a T20 unit also. Otherwise, their consistent run to the semi-finals, say for this edition, would not have been possible. It wasn't a fluke. It wasn't an anomaly. We've unearthed players like Richa Ghosh, Pooja Vastrakar. We've unearthed players like Shafali Verma, Smriti Mandana found a new gear to her batting this year. We felt sure she did not click in that must-win game. Is she
Yeah.
not thinking about it? I'm pretty sure she is. Is Harmanpreet Kaur not thinking about the non-existent single she took and for which Richa Ghosh had to, lose her wicket? I'm sure these reflections are happening. How those
Yeah.
reflections convert to action is what I'm more interested in. I'm more interested in that rather than kitchen narratives and reels conversations, really.
Absolutely. Yeah. T20 World Cups or World Cups, they'll come and go. But yeah, directions to the kitchen are always going to be around. And hopefully, we'll all take those directions seriously. Once we've lifted the title, we'll all go to the kitchen and give ourselves a nice treat. So, just signing off now, you've already told us about your pick for the final. Quick prediction for player of the final.
I think oh, this is a tough one. I did not think this through, perhaps, but I do have a few candidates in mind.
Yeah.
Amelia Kerr, Eden Carson, Tasman Brits. Tasman Brits could be a great story. She's one of my, I wouldn't say favorite stories, but one of the most impactful stories. Remember, had her javelin Olympic dreams dashed because of an accident. Her brother was at a drug abuse center, rehab center at one point. Her father passed away during COVID when South Africa were touring India. Just a fortnight before South Africa were to fly into UAE, her mother was diagnosed with cancer. That woman is carrying a lot of emotional baggage.
Yeah.
Yet, she has led the run charts for the best part of the tournament and is now part of the top five. Who knows? Tasman Brits, because she's being fueled by something else. I feel just looking at her could be that player, Malaba, the very ebullient spin bowling,
He's
beyond
one of the
Celari.
contenders for player of the tournament, right?
Absolutely. Malava as
Hmm.
well, the South African spinner, can light up the final, I feel, in Dubai conditions. So, yeah, Amelia Kerr, Eden Carson, Malaba, Tasman Brits. Let me pick two from each and see how this goes.
Absolutely fair as always, and it's been a really good, engrossing conversation. I'm not sure at which end the internet is a bit patchy. It might be at my end because I'm in a hotel, but yeah, we'll see in the playback. But judging by the response, lots of people have liked us. Lots of people have commented. Yes, my friend Arvind, I am actually doing the Ranji Trophy, and I'm also having this chat with Onisha on the side. So thanks so much. This has always been it's always a pleasure to speak to you, and this has been quite a hopefully we'll see you again soon, Anisha.
Thank you. I lost you there for the best part of your parting note, but I hope none of our kitchen conversations have been lost because of patchy internet. That's very important. As I said, kitchen rocks.
Yeah,
Thank you, Divine.
absolutely. Just heading out. Yes,
On a serious note, I've had immense fun as well, because as I
yeah,
said, it's been a great tournament, and may this usher in a new dawn for women's cricket. And whoever wins tomorrow, may all of us
absolutely.
doff our hats to the great Ravi Shastri and the New Zealand women's cricket team and the South African women's cricket team.
Yeah, absolutely. Enjoy the final, and thanks again.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye. Thanks to all the viewers. Cheers.